The courtroom was supposed to deliver justice, but some parents couldn't wait. Overcome by grief and fury, they attacked the predators who had preyed on their children, leaving the entire room in a state of shock.
Now, according to police, Bruck then waited a half hour before he called police. Now, family of the boy's mother obviously very furious about what happened. They're very saddened about what happened yesterday with the little boy passing away. They initially set up a GoFundMe page.
The case was heard in the Marion County Superior Court, where a southern Indiana man, Nyo Hughes, faces serious charges after the tragic death of his son, 4-year-old Nilo Lattimore. Hughes is accused of beating Nilo, leading to the boy's death in March 2022. The case was all about child abuse.
Doctors first saw Hayden. They initially suspected that he had been a victim of abuse.
On the day of the incident, police were called to the family's home after reports of a distressed child. When officers arrived, they found Nilo unresponsive. Despite their efforts to wake him, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. An autopsy revealed that the young boy had suffered severe injuries, consistent with abuse, just because of Hughes's actions.
He hit him so hard that the boy fell backwards and onto some concrete floor.
As the case proceeded, it became clear that Hughes had a history of violence and troubling behavior. Witnesses reported that he often displayed aggressive tendencies, raising concerns about Nilo's safety. The evidence leads to his arrest shortly after Nilo's death. In court, Hughes's behavior shocked many. He showed little emotion as the details of his son's suffering were presented.
For sexually assaulting a 4-year-old girl. Josiah Davies, who was awaiting arraignment and a hearing on a probation violation, headbutted Elwell.
This disturbing case had captured public attention. Josiah Davies was convicted of sexually assaulting a 4-year-old girl. The crime took place in Dover, New Hampshire, in June 2017. Davies was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison for his actions in the courtroom. During a separate hearing, another inmate, Christopher Elwell, attacked him just because of the deed he had done.
And they described him showing them videos of sexual acts similar to the ones that she had done.
Initially, Elwell denied the accusations, but in court Thursday, he admitted it was true. Elwell also pleaded guilty for failing to register as a sex offender, having been convicted on a different charge back in 2008.
The defendant was required to register as a sex offender.
Elwell had received a sentence of 7.5 to 15 years for his sexual assault of a young girl. While waiting for his arraignment, Davies was seated near Elwell in the courtroom. Suddenly, he attacked Elwell, headbutting him multiple times before deputies could intervene. The attack was shocking and chaotic, drawing gasps from those present. The judge overseeing the proceedings was Judge Stephen M. Huran, who was responsible for the sentencing of both Davies and Elwell. After the attack, Elwell was taken to a hospital for treatment, while Davies faced additional charges for his violent outburst. As the case progressed, Davies was looking at a potential additional sentence of 3.5 to 7 years for the assault on Elwell.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't me, Jeffrey. I kill you. Look at me, mother. I can kill you.
Lunch and recess.
I can kill you.
Jeffrey Dahmer's story begins in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he was born on May 21, 1960. He seemed fine as a kid, but things took a strange turn as he got older. By the time he graduated high school in 1978, he had developed a troubling fascination with animal corpses and a heavy drinking problem. Just weeks after finishing school, he committed his first murder.
We started looking around a little bit and make sure there were no other victims or anybody else in the apartment, and there were human heads and bones and things all over.
He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and, after a night of drinking, struck him with a dumbbell when Hicks tried to leave. Dahmer then hid Hicks's body and buried the remains in his backyard.
Though he accepted the blame for his barbaric crimes, cannibalizing, even crudely lobotomizing some of his victims, Dahmer nonetheless asked for forgiveness.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it.
Years passed before Dahmer struck again. After serving in the Army, he returned home and continued his downward spiral into alcoholism. By the mid-1980s, he was attracting men to his apartment, where he would drug, assault, and kill them.
My name is Rita Isbell, and I'm the oldest sister of Errol Lindsay. Whatever your name is, Satan. I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't me, Jeffrey. I kill you. And look at me, mother. I can kill you.
Punch him, Ray, fast.
I can kill you. You don't have to.
His methods included dismemberment and even cannibalism. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer's rule of terror came to an end when one of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape and alert the police. When authorities entered Dahmer's apartment, they were met with a horrifying scene, filled with photographs of dismembered bodies and human remains.
You are loving, you are a little bit sadistic at times, even in courtroom. You know what I'm saying? which is a normal thing, because that's your job. You know.
You don't think I'm having sexual arousal?
I don't think so. Not that time. Not that time. Not that time.
Dahmer was arrested and later confessed to killing 17 young men. His trial began in January 1992, where he claimed silliness, but the jury found him sane and guilty. He received 15 life sentences. On November 28, 1994, he was murdered in prison, closing a dark chapter in criminal history.
An 18-year-old in Daytona Beach, beaten by the father of a child he sexually assaulted, is going to prison for 25 years.
He just pleaded no contest to an amended charge. In exchange, Raymond Fowler avoided a mandatory life sentence if convicted at trial. West 2's Claire Metz is live at the Justice Center and was in court for the plea.
Yeah, Fowler was caught in the act last summer by the 11-year-old victim's father, who took his outrage out on Fowler's face. Today, the family agreed to a plea deal, lewd and lascivious molestation instead of sexual battery, but the father is no less angry.
How do you plea?
No contest.
I accept your plea.
On the advice of his attorney, Raymond Fowler took a plea and was found guilty of molesting an 11-year-old boy.
In Daytona Beach, Florida, an 18-year-old man named Raymond Fowler was brutally beaten by the father of an 11-year-old boy he had sexually assaulted. Fowler, a family friend who had been tasked to babysit the young victim, was caught in the act of molesting the child by the angry father.
I attacked him viciously, and I didn't stop. The only time I paused was to go to the kitchen and retrieve a butcher knife, because I was going to kill him.
This 35-year-old father, Jason, says he walked in on Fowler, a family friend, attacking his son. Jason told police he went out for a bite to eat, and when he came back, he heard something in the bedroom.
Found my son, Raymond, in the room.
He called 911.
I just walked in and found a grown man molested, and I got him in a bloody puddle for you right now, officer.
When Daytona Beach police showed up, they found Fowler unconscious. He was taken to the hospital, then to jail. Police say Jason won't face any charges for the beating because he was protecting his child as a crime was being committed. Police also say Fowler admitted to the sexual battery. Normally, we would not show the face of a father whose son had been sexually attacked, but this father wanted to show his face and let you know he thinks his son is a hero.
Because I was going to kill him. And my son stepped in front of me and saved his life. He just looked at me and said, "Sir." He shook his head and said, "No." And I just put the knife down. I just wouldn't traumatize him any more than he already was.
The father, without hesitation, beat him with punches and kicks, leaving him bloodied and unconscious on the floor. He then dragged the perpetrator into the living room and called the police, calmly informing them that he had got him in a bloody puddle for them. Despite the father's violent retaliation, he was not charged with the assault, with the police chief stating that he had done what any father would have done in such a situation. Fowler, on the other hand, faced serious consequences for his actions.
When the father returned home last July to find Fowler sexually battering his son. The father admitted then he would have killed Frolander if the victim, his son, hadn't stopped him.
After pleading no contest to the charge of lewd and molestation of a victim younger than 12, which carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, Frolander was sentenced by Judge Leah Case to 25 years behind bars.
He's gonna learn in the next 25 years why I let him live. Now I can't afford to replace y'all's cameras.
The victim's father, when asked about the sentencing, simply stated, "He's going to learn in the next 25 years why I let him live," highlighting the gravity of Frolander's actions and the lasting impact on the child and his family.
You know, since this all happened, it's kind of been, people think I'm some kind of hero when I'm actually not. I just, did what I thought was best in the time that I was given. I don't know, I've been getting these emails saying that, it's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up. So I don't feel bad for what I did, I feel bad for maybe the families, his family or something. But as far as remorse towards him, no.
Stephen Sanderson was already serving life in prison for murder. He'd been behind bars for years when, in 2014, he found himself sharing a cell with another inmate, a man named Ted Dyer. Dyer was in jail for a crime that disgusted Sanderson. He was a convicted child molester. From the moment Dyer walked into that cell, things were tense. Sanderson claimed he couldn't stand being in the same room as someone like Dyer. Over time, the frustration built up. According to Sanderson, Dyer had started bragging about his crimes, which Sanderson says pushed him over the edge.
All right, I guess he decided to clear his conscience or something, but, he told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, I told him that's enough, I don't want to hear anymore. I first, punched him a couple times. Still wouldn't shut up. Still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad and then hit him and then I killed him.
One night, as Dyer lay in his bed, Sanderson snapped. He strangled Dyer in their cell, killing him.
How do you wish to plead to murder in the second? Guilty?
Yes, sir.
When Sanderson was brought before Judge Amy Hathaway in Michigan the next day, he openly admitted to what he had done. He showed no remorse. Sanderson explained that he couldn't let Dyer live, knowing what he had done to the children. It was a calm confession, with Sanderson even telling the courtroom, "I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who did what I had to do."
It's not my position to judge anybody. And I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up.
Judge Hathaway had no choice but to add another life sentence to his record. Sanderson was already serving life without parole for his original crime, so this sentence would just keep him in prison for good.
From the time that I was 8 years old, until I was 12 years old, I was sexually assaulted and raped by Dennis Pegg. It started out with him wanting to touch my scar that I had from open heart surgery at the age of 6. Progressed to wrestling matches, eventually led to him raping me.
Clark Fredericks' case happened in a New Jersey courtroom, where he stood before Judge Thomas J. Critchley. His story was different from most. Fredericks wasn't just another man accused of murder. He was a man seeking justice for the unspeakable horrors he claimed to have suffered as a child.
Dennis Pegg told me that he had sexual relations with a close family relative, and also my childhood friend Jeff Hall. He described those relations in detail, and I believed him. In the spring of 2011, I sold Dennis Pegg with a boy who was about 13 or 14 years old at Quick Check in Newton. He told me that he got drunk and naked with one of my close relatives.
Fredericks had been sexually abused by a former Boy Scout leader, Dennis Pegg, for years. Pegg was someone Fredericks had once looked up to and trusted, but the abuse left him deeply scarred. The pain and trauma followed him throughout his life, displaying anger and rage that simmered beneath the surface for decades. It all came to a boiling point on June 12, 2012.
Dave Carlin reports on the case that has many asking, was Clark Fredericks right or wrong?
On that day, Fredericks couldn't take it any longer. Fueled by memories of his abuse, he and his friend Robert Reynolds went to Pegg's home. Armed with a knife, Fredericks confronted the man who had stolen his childhood. What started as a confrontation quickly escalated into violence. Fredericks repeatedly stabbed Pegg, ending the life of the man he believed had ruined his.
To him as a child and what he did about it 3 decades later.
It started out with him wanting to touch my scar that I had from open heart surgery at the age of 6.
After his arrest, Fredericks did not deny his actions. He was open about why he had done it. In a powerful courtroom statement, he said, "I did what I felt I had to do to stop the nightmare." His voice wavered as he explained the years of torment and how no one had listened to his cries for help. He described his act as one of desperation, not revenge.
The trial started for serial child molester and former Penn State coach Jerry Sandusky.
My reaction to seeing Sandusky get out of that car with his lawyer was that Dennis Pegg would never be held accountable. My shell cracked.
Judge Critchley had a tough decision to make. On one hand, Fredericks had committed murder, and on the other, a lifetime of pain had led to that moment.
But his guilty plea on charges of passion, provocation, manslaughter avoids a murder charge. As he left the courtroom, this eruption of applause.
For coming out and standing up for himself.
No one related to Pegg made any public statements. The prosecutors who agreed to the plea deal hope this brings closure.
And we feel it is a fair and appropriate result, given all the circumstances.
The judge said the sentence, anywhere from 5 to 10 years in prison, will be announced in September.
In the end, the court accepted a plea deal. Fredericks pleaded guilty to manslaughter, a lesser charge than murder, acknowledging that his actions, while driven by trauma, were still wrong.
Well, I'm gonna have to get something on.
Stay down. I understand.
Let me have it, son of a bitch.
I understand, but stay down.
I want that.
Stop fighting.
In a courtroom scene, Randall Margraves, the father of 3 victims of former USA Gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar, could no longer contain his grief and anger. During Nassar's 3rd sentencing hearing, Margraves lunged at the disgraced doctor, creating a dramatic and chaotic moment that captured the nation's attention. The incident occurred on February 2, 2018, in Eaton County, Michigan. Margraves was present to support his daughters, who were among the many victims, giving impact statements about the abuse they suffered at the hands of Nassar.
He hijacked a rare pelvic therapy that involves vaginal penetration and used it to treat all sorts of ailments. He ignored protocols such as using a glove, asking consent, or having a medical chaperone present.
And when I was 14 years old, I tore my hamstring in my right leg. This was when he started performing the procedure that we are all now familiar with.
The next visit was for my shoulder, which I then found out my hips were out of alignment, which then made my spine and my pelvic bone out of alignment as well. And this is when Larry decided that it was medically acceptable to violate a 16-year-old girl.
When confronted by parents, coaches, and eventually investigators, Nassar said patients may have misunderstood his therapy.
As one of his daughters recounted her harrowing experience, Margraves, overcome with emotion, asked the judge if he could have 5 minutes alone with Nassar. When the judge denied his request, he asked for just 1 minute. Upon being refused again, Margraves charged at Nassar, shouting, "Let me at that son of a bitch!" Court officers quickly intervened, restraining Margraves and pinning him to the ground. The courtroom was thrown into disarray as emotions ran high, with many crying and reacting to the sudden outburst.
And rotate again.
The official physician for Team USA.
Squeeze, hips flat.
Margraves was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. He later appeared before the judge to face potential charges for his actions. Margraves was not charged with any crime. Margraves apologized for his actions, expressing deep regret and explaining that he lost control after hearing the details of his daughter's abuse and seeing Nassar's reaction in court. Larry Nassar, a former Michigan State University and USA gymnastics team doctor, was accused of sexually abusing hundreds of young female athletes under the guise of medical treatment. Nassar was ultimately sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison for his crimes, in addition to a 60-year federal sentence for possessing child pornography. That's the shocking story of what went down in that courtroom. If this video got your attention, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life cases. Leave a comment. What do you think about parents taking matters into their own hands? Stay tuned for our next video, coming soon.